Wow, that was so nice. Of course, I have to move this way low. It's so funny to be called a risk taker because my heart is pounding out of my chest right now. Thank you so much, Susan, for that beautiful intro. And I just also wanted to thank AP and all the staff of the College of Humanities, Michelle and Jenna, and everybody has just been so wonderful and welcoming. And I am truly grateful to be and honored and humbled to be selected as the Alumna of the Year this year. Also, actually, let me do a couple of other thanks before I launch in. I wanted to thank all my friends and family who are here today, Mike and Casey Brewer, and Christine and Susan Connor, of course, and my husband Jeff, and my stepdaughter Tavia, and my sister Tammy, and her husband Robert. Everyone really cut out a lot of time and energy to come down and support me, and so I'm really grateful for that. I also wanted to thank all my family who have been so incredibly supportive and weren't able to be here today. So my mom and dad, and my sister Sherry, my brother Jay, and my other stepchildren Anya and Gabe. And lastly, I want to thank my colleagues at Make-A-Wish San Diego because they are an incredible supportive group of people who have really kind of helped me, like everyone in my sphere, get to where I am today. So thank you. So when I first learned that I would be the Alumna of the Year and speaking with all of you today, I thought, oh my God, how am I possibly going to follow speeches by former alumni of the year like Andre Goodfriend, a top-level diplomat with the U.S. State Department, or Dante Loretta, a professor of planetary sciences who explodes asteroids. I'm just a Russian department graduate. And then, I thought about it and I realized that my message today isn't about following anybody. It's about connecting with them. And it's a beautiful thing, I think, about the humanities is that it is all about connections. And so I think the fact of the matter is that none of us are following anybody, right? So I thought I would share with you a story that I think really exemplifies this about Zayden's wish to go to Saturn.
He loves outer space. He was always fascinated with stars.
And when you ask him what he really likes, it always goes back to the rocket ship in outer space.
Mm-hmm. The day he was born, August 18th, they found out he had a heart condition.
One of the valves in his heart was pumping a lot of fluid to his lungs.
His total is 4 open heart surgeries and 38 heart catheterizations.
Go for a walk.
Go for a walk. All right, let's go. And he has a very vivid imagination.
Very.
I asked him, what's outer space? What's out there? What's in Saturn? And he said, an alien. Mm-hmm. A green alien.
Engage the Zayden 7.
Oh.
Initiating boarding. Welcome to the Zayden 7.
Z-A-Y-D-E-N.
Prepare for launch.
Ready? Ready.
We have liftoff.
Enter the glass. Yeah, I can see it over there.
Let me show you where your house is.
Yeah, that's my house.
Look to your right, we're passing the moon.
The moon.
This is my favorite part. You have arrived at Saturn.
Can we land?
Prepare for landing.
Yeah! Oh my god! I see a rainbow! Rainbow! Rainbow!
All right, time to head home.
My rocket! Wow, I went in outer space!
How was it?
It was fun!
My missions to space, of course, were really exceptional, but getting to participate in this, making this little boy's wish come true, it's really great. First astronaut on Saturn.
So can we do that again?
This is the first virtual reality wish that we've ever done. He also had very specific expectations of his journey, not based in science, but on his imagination.
We can use new technology to really just bring more joy to the world. It's just really special to be a part of that.
So many people went out of their way to make this Zayden's Day, to make our son's wish come true.
It was amazing.
So, every wish is so special in so many ways, and this is one of the reasons why you all have tissue on your chairs, by the way. It's because every wish is so special in every way. Zayden's wish has just stayed with me for several big reasons. One of them is obviously just how incredibly special that little boy is, and it's obvious, right? That's just incredible. The second reason, though, is that for years leading up to this wish, people would ask me, especially my stepkids, they would ask me, and they're a little bit younger then, is there a wish that you can't do? Is there a wish that Make-A-Wish can't make happen? And I would always say, we can make most things happen, but of course we can't send a child to outer space. And then Zayden's wish happened. And it was just a couple of years ago, and it was the Georgia chapter that made it happen. And they pulled together this community of people who had no connection to one another, right? So you had this gentleman from NASA, an astronaut. You had all of these folks that worked in the military in the air base there. You had the virtual reality company. And then, of course, you had the volunteers. You had the limo driver that drove that child to his wish. You had the staff of the Make-A-Wish chapter in Georgia. All of these people came together to make something really extraordinary happen. And this is what happens at Make-A-Wish every day. And this is, again, what I would argue is the power of a humanities degree, right? Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about an outline for today, and then we'll get into it. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and my history and how I got to the U of A and how that got me where I am today. Then I'm going to tell you a little bit about the nonprofit sector, which is where I've hung my hat for the past 35-ish years. And I'm going to pepper it throughout with a couple of stories about Make-A-Wish. Does that sound good? All right, let's get started. Okay, I grew up in San Diego in a suburban home, 18 years, living in the same home with my mom and my dad and my sister Tammy, my other sister Sherry, and my brother Jay. It was a very privileged and idyllic childhood, I will say. We had literally no tragedies happen in our lives except for perhaps the loss of a bird or two, pet bird, Harry. And from a very early age, I was really interested in all things international. I really was. Have any of you ever been to Balboa Park in San Diego? Okay, there's a part of the park there that you probably know called the Cultural Cottages. That's up there on the right. And the cultural cottages, each one of them represents a different country in the world. And as a child, I used to absolutely love to go there and wander through the different houses and learn about these different countries. Every one of the houses is staffed by volunteers who have some connection to that country. It could just be a love of it. And they would give you samples of food, and they would show you pictures and tell you stories. And it was just so fun for me. And to this very day, I have a single shekel that was given to me in the house of Israel. It still sits among all my coins from the different countries that I visited throughout my life. And then I had two kind of seminal international experiences during my childhood. One of them was when I was in junior high school. The Spanish class had a trip to Mexico every year. It was a 2-week trip to Mexico, and when it came to be my turn to go, we went to Mexico City, Veracruz, and Cordoba, which is a small city in Mexico, in Veracruz, the state of Veracruz. And imagine this, 35 tweens traveling for 2 weeks in a foreign country. We probably had 3 chaperones, including our Spanish teacher. And we had the time of our lives. People would come to our hotel, guys would always come to our hotel and wanted to meet us, and they would take us to cafes. And I remember going with one kid and visiting his college. I mean, I was 14 or 13 years old. I think now back to that time, and like, literally, would anyone let their child do something like that today? But at that time, it was really an amazing, immersive experience. And one more story about that. In Cordoba, and the reason why I put this postcard up here, we went and visited a school with other kids our age, and they paired each of us up with a child in the school, and we went home with them for lunch. How cool is that, right? So, mind blown for the 13-year-old me. The second experience was when I was in high school. I went to Europe on a summer program there were several high schools that participated in this, and my parents were obviously pretty amazing to let me go on all of these experiences abroad. And so this trip was a little bit different than the Mexico trip in that we traveled to almost every major city in Europe in a month. And so we had maybe a day or a day and a half in each city. And so we didn't really get to know people, but we did get to try foods and go to every major museum and church. And I will remember I had my very first authentic croissant. I know I'm butchering that pronunciation. I'm sorry, Robert and Elaine. And I had my very first, it was in Vienna. We went to this ice cream shop, and it was this delicious peach ice cream, Mietschlag, that I remember to this day. I can taste it still to this day. And I fell in love with cobblestone streets. We don't have those in San Diego, and tiny green cars. And then, it came time to start thinking about college and what was I going to do. And I knew I wanted to go somewhere where I would, somewhere new, where I would experience new things. Obviously, I'd grown up in San Diego 18 years. I was ready to spread my wings. And I ended up coming to the University of Arizona because it was the farthest place away that my parents would let me come. My brother went to school here as well, and so they felt like, I'd be safe if I had family here. And it was also, I did apply to a few other places, and the U of A won out because it was so big, and there were just so many programs here. And I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do, but I thought that I would have that opportunity to explore it in a place like this. And so originally I thought I would study journalism. I wanted to be a photojournalist, or I wanted to also be a doctor. So I was taking biology, chemistry. That went away very quickly. And we all had to take a foreign language as part of our basic requirements. And so I was wandering through the halls of the Modern Languages building trying to pick a language, because obviously in high school and junior high we had Spanish and also German and French, But again, there's so much out there, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I'm wandering through the halls, and suddenly this gentleman comes out of the Russian department hallway. It was Dr. Malik, who was the chair of the department at that time. And he hooked my arm and walked me down the hallway and showed me the posters and talked about the programs and the classes and the professors, the wonderful professors like Dr. Dunkel. And I was hooked, so I signed up. I took Russian 101 with Dr. Del Phillips, and I think it was during that time that I changed my major to Russian. It didn't take a whole lot. It was so fun and so interesting. Mind you, this is in 1984, and it's still during the Cold War. Perestroika had not happened yet, and there wasn't a whole lot of information about Russia coming out. What we did have coming out of there was about conflict. And so this program changed all that for me. I didn't just get to learn the language, I got to learn about the culture and the history and the literature, and it was so beautiful and fascinating. Compared to anything I had seen before. I fell in love. So in my second year here in the summer, Susan mentioned we went on that wonderful program with Dr. Phillips and other students in the Russian program. And it was during the summer, we traveled around the former Soviet Union. We were supposed to go to Kiev, but that got canceled because Chernobyl had happened the year before. Remember that? And so we traveled to Vilnius and Kishinev, and we went to Moscow and Leningrad, and we met people. So again, unlike my Europe trip, but very much like my Mexico program, we actually got to know people. And we went home with them. We had tea. We got drunk on a lot of vodka. And we went to the park, and it was the most amazing, again, immersive experience that I had thus far in my life. And of course, there were the beautiful museums and the amazing churches and all the historical sites and the culture. I went to the opera for the first time and fell asleep very quickly. I don't know, any of you ever been to a foreign language opera? Even though I had been studying the language, it still was just like all above me. It just went past me. So yeah, that was a really great program. And the thing that was my number one takeaway from that trip was how very much the Russians were like us. They were very much like us. Obviously, so many differences, but we had the same hopes and dreams for our lives. And that was a beautiful thing to learn on a program like that. All right, let me see. So fast forward, I graduated, had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. At that time, I understand things have really changed here at the U of A since then, but at that time, if there was a career center, we didn't know it existed. And we didn't really have a whole lot of guidance. I didn't have a whole lot of guidance. There were so many things that I was interested in, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life still. And there was nobody here at that time to help me shape all the things that I was excited about into a career. And so I ended up just having a lot of fun with my Russian degree. Susan mentioned that I worked out on a fishing boat in the Bering Sea. So Dr. Adele Barker got a job listing from someone for a position on these ships out in the Bering Sea. It was a joint venture between Russia and the United States. And the company was based in Seattle, and they needed people who could interpret to keep the peace between the Russians and the Americans. So that was what I did. My first year out of college, I learned what is affectionately called fish Russian. It's not something that you will ever hear or use in any situation other than that. I was based in Seattle, so I also got to be a driver for the principal dancers of the Bolshoi Ballet during the Goodwill Games. Anyone remember the Goodwill Games? Anyone? I think it was maybe 1 year or two. But they had a cultural whole thing around the Goodwill Games. And the ballet came, and I got to spend a beautiful amount of time with these amazing dancers and learn about their horrible diets. I also did another study abroad program in Leningrad, and now we're much closer to the Soviet Union dissolving, so there wasn't a whole lot of fuel, and there was very little food. And so all I really remember from that probably 6-month period was how cold it was and how hungry we were, and spending a lot of time scrounging around trying to find something to eat. And I remember eating a lot of hard-boiled eggs because that's what they served in the bars and the fancy hotels, because that's where we would end up going to eat. Eventually, I ended up having a conversation with a friend of mine, and I didn't know what I wanted to do again. And I graduated with my master's degree, and I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And she said to me, well, a very simple question: what do you like to do? And I honestly had never thought about it in those terms, but it was such an easy way of looking at it. And I said, well, I would like to use my degree. I've spent now 9 years on getting degrees in Russian, and I love to write. And if I'm going to be spending 8 hours a day working, I would really like it to be doing something that makes a difference in this world. And she said, what about grant writing? And I had never really heard about grant writing. I didn't know anything about the nonprofit sector at that time, but the University of Washington had an extension program in nonprofit management, so I signed up. And I had, in the meantime, been applying for whatever jobs were out there that related to writing, Russian, or nonprofit work. And about 9 months into my program, I got my first real job in Washington, D.C., working for an international exchange organization called ACTR that worked with the former Soviet Union. And I became a program officer, and I had to write my own proposals and my own reports. And soon after that, about a year later, a position became available at a competitive organization called International Research and Exchanges Board for a grant writer. So I took that position. And within a few years, a position became available at the Holocaust Memorial Museum, and I ended up kind of segueing out of using Russian and focusing more on my grant writing. The museum experience was amazing, and then a couple years later, a great position became available at NARAL, Pro-Choice America, a women's rights organization that I felt very strongly about, and so I took that and ended up heading up their grants program for a few years. Eventually, I made my way back to San Diego, and again segued all my skills and knowledge and experiences into a fundraising role at UC San Diego Health System, and then into another similar role at San Diego Hospice, and finally to where I am right now at Make-A-Wish San Diego. I'm the Vice President of Development there. I oversee the whole fundraising function for our organization, and I think every experience that I had leading up to Make-A-Wish has really led to my being able to see the big picture, think more strategically about how we raise money toward fulfilling our mission. So that's, and here's a few pictures of that. All of the places, by the way, that I worked at obviously have these deeply humanistic missions, right? That's the main common factor of any nonprofit, is that it's working to make a difference in this world. And so even though I'm not using my Russian anymore, and I do writing, but the wanting to make a difference every day in the positions I'm in has definitely been a big part of the roles that I've had. And so I'm pleased about that. So let's segue a little bit into a conversation about nonprofits. Again, that's something that I've been doing for a long time now, and so, when you're talking, you want to talk about what you know. So I think a lot of people don't really understand just how very many nonprofits there are in this world. I'm going to give you a few numbers, and I want a show of hands what you think is how many nonprofits are in San Diego County alone. 570? Anybody? Nope. Okay, smart group. Oh, I gave you the answer. Shoot. I jumped way ahead. It's technology. 11,234 nonprofits. Does anyone seem surprised by how many there are? The nonprofit, charity has been around, obviously, since the very, very beginning of time. But the nonprofit sector was created in 1969 in the United States, pretty recently, right? So there are charities, a few very notable exceptions, like the YMCA or the Salvation Army or the Red Cross, that have been around forever. International Rescue Committee, that's another one that's been around for a very long time. But as a sector, we weren't really created until 1969, and that was because Congress passed the Tax Reform Act that year, which allowed charities to give tax deductions to their donors. And so suddenly, all these different charities started registering with the IRS and formalizing themselves. And the second probably biggest jump in the nonprofit sector happened in the 1980s when I was here at the University of Arizona, and Ronald Reagan was the president of the United States. So for better or worse, he was working to cut or decrease federal funding on all these various domestic programs that were happening around the United States at that time. And because of that cut in funding, you, your neighbors, your friends started forming charities in order to meet these needs that were no longer being met by the government. And we had this, again, huge influx of people coming in and registering with the IRS with their new charity. A 501c3 charity, which is defined by that Tax Reform Act, is a charity that has a board of directors, and their roles are defined by the bylaws of the organization. But it doesn't take much, right? You don't have to necessarily have a staff. You don't have to have a lot of money to do this. And many organizations didn't start, or most organizations start actually at that very grassroots level. So Make-A-Wish is one of those organizations. It started at an extremely grassroots level with a young boy named Chris Gracious, who was at the end stage of his battle with leukemia. He had always wanted to be a police officer. And so when it looked like the end was nearing, his mother called a friend who knew some people in the police department. This was in Phoenix, Arizona, so not far from here. And that friend pulled in his powers and helped make this wish happen with the help of a lot of people. So I'm going to share that story with you now.
I don't think there was any way that any of us could vision how this was going to spread, how this was going to just take off in all directions. It's not just United States, it's worldwide.
There was a culmination of a whole lot of different people's ideas coming together. And it came together amazingly well.
I don't know what the impact was, but I have an idea. There's a few thousand people who over 35 years have impacted millions. Millions.
In 1972, I gave birth to Christopher. He was 4 pounds, 7 ounces. The nurse brought him to me and said, "Don't get attached, he won't live." And I said, yes, he will. I knew he would never grow up. I knew that just by holding him, looking at him. So I made every day count. Chris was my little buddy. He really was. We were planning on coming back to Phoenix for a visit. And along in mid-Texas, I noticed Chris he wasn't himself. Something is just not right. We took him right in. The doctor did a little pinprick on Chris and came back a short time later and said he has leukemia. The poor doctor just looked at me and looked at my brother and my mother and wrote down an address, St. Joseph's Hospital, and said, go there, they're waiting for you. I made a vow that night to even be, they say, a better mother, to even have more fun with him. We just kind of went from there. We really did, day by day, week by week, whatever we needed to do. Community college class, I'd met a lady by the name of Kay Austin. Her husband happened to be a U.S. Customs agent, which I didn't know.
Turned over and he said, freeze. I'm a police officer, so I froze. He got off the couch and he carefully searched my front pockets, and he was satisfied I was clean. He holstered his weapon. He stuck out his hand and he said, hi, I'm Chris. And from that moment on, we were buds. We were best friends. We were pals.
We absolutely loved having them be a part of our family. And Tommy began to talk to Lynn at that time about doing something special for Chris.
In mid-April, Chris had gone out of remission, and it was coming very close to the end. And I made a phone call, but to Tom Austin. And I said, Tom, if there's any way possible to make that promise come true, now is the time. Tom got on the phone to Ronnie Cox. Said, Ronnie, it's time.
I said, hey, do you think we can give this guy, this young man, a show and tell around the helicopter? And his answer was, oh no, we'll give him a ride in it.
I called Chris on Friday, and hello, very weak drawings, very weak. Said, Chris, how would you like to have a ride on a real police helicopter Monday morning? Instantaneous, that voice changed. Oh, Tom, you're joking, you're joking.
And I said, yeah, we can do that, and we'll tour him around and all that.
6 o'clock Monday morning, the phone rang. Hello? Hi, Tom, this is Chris. You hadn't forgotten, have you? I said, no, I hadn't forgotten. Well, I went over there about 20 minutes till 8, and he was already out in the driveway. And I wish you could have seen the look on his face when I drove up. He knew it was real. A smile from ear to ear.
He was given a ride in a real Ranger helicopter. They landed at the Department of Public Safety. From there, we went over to Colonel Schaefer's office.
He walks around, high fives everybody, introduces himself.
We stood him up on my desk, and I swore him in, handed him that certificate, and pinned the badge on his coat.
It was wonderful. Chris was such a proud little boy. I mean, to him, with that badge, hat, everything, he was a policeman. He really was. This was something that I was totally helpless to do, but Tom had pulled it off with the help of Ronnie and help of all of the DPS officers.
We happened to hit on the most universal emotion there is. It's totally universal. There's no language boundaries, no country boundaries, no philosophy, no attitude, no political boundaries. It's universal. The people who are there today, 35 years later, carry that torch, same rules, all kinds of same things that we set up when we sat down and said, how are we going to do this thing?
I see tissue being used. So, going back into a little bit about the nonprofit sector, obviously this one started in 1980. That was when most of the nonprofits started, the Make-A-Wishes started kicking off, was right after that happened. There was a story on NBC about Make-A-Wish, about what they did in Phoenix, and all these people all around the country and all around the world saw it and said, and this is in the day before social media, they said, I want to do that too in my community. And so 1983, Make-A-Wish San Diego was started by a woman named Jamie Tucker. She got together some friends and colleagues in her garage, and the chapter actually worked out of her garage for at least the first several years. Didn't have paid staff for a few years after that. But now we've been around 35 years. We've granted over 4,000 wishes. And pick any city in this country, and you will hear a similar story. It's pretty incredible. So let's talk a little bit about what it takes to put together what a nonprofit is comprised of. Because the reason I'm here, obviously, is this is about the humanities and the connection to it. And one of the things that I would say that is the most important thing that I got out of my degree here was the ability to talk to people from different backgrounds and listen to their innumerable perspectives and be able to find just as many ways to match up their passions and their interests with the organizations where I've worked. And so I would say that almost every role within a nonprofit feeds into that in some way or another, has to utilize that in some way or another. I'm going to give you a very boring kind of description of a nonprofit just from a very, very big overview. So you have your board of directors that I mentioned earlier, and those are all volunteers to the organization. So they come to the organization with a variety of different backgrounds, and then they have a passion for what that organization does. And I would say, to you also today, think about the kinds of things that you're passionate or excited about. There is a nonprofit for you somewhere, somehow. I love birds. We've had birds ever since I was a child. And if I Google nonprofits in San Diego alone that do something related to birds, I will probably find about 100 charities. If I Google nonprofits in San Diego that work with parrots, I'll probably find at least 5. So there is a place for you. And then the issue is there a spot for you? You don't have to work at a nonprofit in order to be a part of what they accomplish in this world. These are the working people in a nonprofit. And I think with a degree in the humanities, you really have a good skill set to be able to fit into a lot of these different roles. The board of directors is a volunteer role. If the organization is strong enough and has enough revenue, they'll hire a CEO or an executive director to run the day-to-day operations of the organization. And that person requires a variety of skills. And we'll talk about the skills in a bit. Again, if the organization is large enough, they're going to have a finance director. If they're not, then they can certainly pay a consultant to do this work. But every organization has to submit its tax documentation every year and get audited on a regular basis. A lot of people talk about, the bad actors in the nonprofit world. But you can tell pretty obviously if an organization is a solid one or not simply by looking up their public records, because all of these are public records. Look up their finances. It's all in there. Then there are two sides of the shop, and we talk about that at Make-A-Wish, like two sides of the office, and it actually is literally two sides of the office because we have the the programming side, or the wish department, is on one side of the office, and then the fundraising side, or the development department, is on the other side. We raise the money and they spend the money. They are the people who are the boots on the ground. I hate that expression, but the boots on the ground. They are getting their hands dirty, making every one of these wishes happen. We do have 300-ish volunteers, and every Make-A-Wish chapter is mostly volunteer driven. We have 21 staff and 300 volunteers, so you can do the math. How are you going to get all these wishes granted? It's with the volunteers. But what the programming staff do is they coordinate those volunteers. You need someone to kind of puppeteer the whole thing, just like you saw with Zayden's wish, and actually just like you saw with Chris Gracious's wish. There's a lot of different people that are involved in making these wishes come true, but someone has to coordinate all that, and that's the staff. If you're a big enough organization, you'll have an HR department, you'll have an IT department. Not every organization does. These are things that you can hire consultants to come in and do. And then marketing and communications, which I would argue is one of the most important functions at a nonprofit, because these are the people that tell the stories that inspire people to support your organization. All of these areas, there's so many different positions that fall within it that require different skill sets. I would say a humanities degree, and many of the skill sets the skills that you get from a humanities degree, and really even just from going to college, are things that are going to benefit you in any one of those positions that you saw before. But a couple of things that come to mind: adaptability. So Susan mentioned the hitchhiking incident. We went on this tour of the Tchaikovsky House Museum. I don't even remember where it was. It was very far away from Moscow, from the city center where we were staying. We were on a bus, and this whole experience was just bizarre from the beginning. So we're on this bus, we're driving out there, the windshield of the bus shatters. The driver continues driving with no windshield. We make it there somehow, and we get there and we find out that Tchaikovsky didn't even live there. He had stopped there, just randomly stopped there one day, and they decided to create a house museum. And so me and another friend there, we were just like, what the heck is this about? So we decided to go back and decided to hitchhike. And I would say that falls under the adaptability skills. I honed my adaptability skills on that trip. Actually, working with Russian, I think every single thing that gets thrown at you, you hone your adaptability skills. Writing and communication, just in general, I think writing and being able to talk to people. Again, going back to how we deal with people from all these different perspectives and backgrounds, and to be able to really sit down with someone and say, this is why my organization and what it does is so important. And this is why you should care. And by the way, I'm going to listen to you, because that's another skill that I learned. And I'm going to hear what matters to you and see if I can be a matchmaker and pair you up to something that will really fulfill your own passions and excite you and make you feel excited to be a part of what we're doing. Critical thinking, obviously, being organized, and that's just a college skill, I think, to have to be able to make it to class on time and get your papers in on time and prioritize what's the most important thing that you have to do in a day. All of those things, I think, are just college skills. So skills, obviously, very, very important. On a day-to-day basis, I use all of them, and on a day-to-day basis, I don't really think about it when I'm doing it. I'm just doing it. I want to tell you a couple of stories about wishes that I've been involved with, and so you can see kind of on a day-to-day what it is that I do. All of us at Make-A-Wish, or not all of us, most of us also volunteer, and so we actually get to be a part of wishes, which helps us then tell the stories. So in this case, this is Samantha. Samantha is now a student at UCLA, but when she was granted her wish, she was still in high school. She was a soccer star and amazing, bright, incredibly courageous young lady. She was diagnosed with osteosarcoma. As it often happens, I think, with children when they get osteosarcoma, they're on a field somewhere playing a sport and they get an unusual break, or they fall and something hurts and they go to the ER, and next thing you know, it gets diagnosed to be osteosarcoma. She was diagnosed, and I think by Thanksgiving of that year, part of her leg had been amputated. And then she was referred for a wish, and I went with my fellow wish granter, Faith, and we went to meet her in the hospital where she was undergoing very, very, very intensive chemotherapy. It's hard to describe what that experience is like. She was barely able to function when we were in the hospital room with her. And, it's very awkward, like for us as visitors. You go in and you think, oh, how am I going to, talk to this girl? She's not even really paying attention to us. And you're like, yay, we're bringing you a wish. Now, when she talks back about her Make-A-Wish experience, she always references that day. We didn't even know that she noticed that we were in the room. She references that day of the day that things changed for her. And so her wish was to go to Santorini, Greece. And I think when you're in a hospital room and you're dealing with the kinds of things that these kids are dealing with, you want to be as far away from there as you possibly can. And so Santorini, Greece, obviously pretty far away, but also so tranquil and beautiful. And, when you think about it, a lot of these kids wish for travel wishes specifically for that reason. 70% of our wishes are wishes to travel somewhere. So we ended up sending her on her wish. It was after her chemo was done. She was still in the process of getting fitted for a prosthetic, and so she wasn't going to be able to really walk a lot, so we ended up sending her on a Mediterranean cruise, but she did get to go to Santorini. Her mother pushed her in a wheelchair up these amazingly steep streets. I don't know how she did it. Sam has graduated high school since then. She's a student at UCLA, as I mentioned, and unfortunately her cancer has come back, and so she's kind of going through a battle once again. Yeah. Really tough. This is Kahlo. Kahlo is just this sweet little boy who absolutely loved everything about Frozen. So I think you can tell from his picture in the hospital, he's carrying an Elsa doll. And his wish was to meet Elsa. So we were able to send him to Disneyland with his family. This picture with the Elsa and Anna actresses is funny because we had planned a wish reveal for him. And it was a party for him and his siblings and his cousins. And the place that we hired to do this, which ended up not charging us for it, hired a couple of actresses unbeknownst to us to kind of lead the day. And they did such an amazing job. They did a beautiful job, and you can see from the smile on his face, like how happy that made him. And, it was funny when I first started working at Make-A-Wish, and I was a little bit cynical about Disneyland and Disney World and everything Disney, because Disney is so prevalent in the media. If you think about it, it's just constant on TV, and they advertise all the time. You would be, you get a quick turnaround when you're with a child and they wish for something related to Disney. It is the most magical experience in the world for them. It truly is. And you are reminded by these experiences that it's not about you and your own interpretation of what that wish is. It's about that child and what their imagination is drawing up for them. So they're pretty exciting. Oop, shoot, sorry. I went too far. We'll stay there for a minute. So, obviously, you know, the skills that I have brought to the table and my whole history has led me to this place that I'm in today. And I think you all have your own backgrounds and histories that bring you to where you are today. I think, I've totally lost the train of thought. I'm so honored that I got selected to be the Alumna of the Year. So thank you for that. Thank you for thinking of me. I'm hoping that today when you hear what I have to say, even if your own trajectory has taken you somewhere totally different, that it might inspire you to start thinking about what you get passionate about and how you can make a difference in this world. And as I mentioned, it's really easy these days to find that place and to find that role, either as a volunteer or as an employee. It's not too late to ever enter the nonprofit sector, and certainly to work with a place like Make-A-Wish. I thought I would, after thanking you, just leave you today with a video that kind of pulls together the whole connectivity of the humanities as it relates to Make-A-Wish. So thank you.
Today, can you see it? We got a beautiful